We became the woke department. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that.
America, Pete Hegseth just fired the Army's top general. Democrats are demanding investigations, and the New York Times is calling it a purge. Let me tell you what actually happened. The Army Chief of Staff was actively fighting to preserve DEI promotions inside the United States military, while America is at war with Iran. Hegseth said no. George didn't stop it, so Hegseth fired him. Y'all want to tell me which part of that is wrong? The left's meltdown over this isn't evidence that Hegseth overstepped. It's the receipt that he actually hit the target that he was aiming at.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. Foolish and reckless political leaders set the wrong compass heading. We became the woke department, but not anymore. But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign.
What is up, guys? Tyson Dela Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. 4 years under the Joey B, under the Biden administration. The Biden administration turned the United States military into the most expensive social experiment in American history. They built DEI offices in the Pentagon. They ran identity months. They promoted officers for historic firsts. We're talking about first black this, first woman this, first former man, now a woman this, first PlayStation 3 that plays PlayStation 4 games, and they called it leadership development. They eliminated physical standards that existed for a reason and called it inclusion. And while they were doing all that, they were spending my tax dollars on it, our money, building a military that looked like a good press release while it forgot about how to win wars. Here's what Hegseth said about that standard. Listen carefully to the second half of this.
Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. If not, they're not standards. They're just suggestions. Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed.
Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed. That's not hypothetical. That is what happens when you put somebody in a leadership role that they weren't actually qualified to do because it checks a diversity, equity, inclusion plus box. Biden didn't fight wars. Biden wore a flight jacket to a photo op and got called presidential. Hegseth is inside the actual military, firing the generals who were more concerned about diversity metrics than war fighting. And suddenly, all of a sudden, he's a threat to national security. That's the framing the media wants you to accept here. Now, here's what Biden's military looked like from the inside. Not the press releases, the reality.
Just look at the current Army Spiritual Fitness Guide. In well over 100 pages, it mentions God one time. That's it. It mentions feelings 11 times. It even mentions playfulness, whatever that is, 9 times. There's zero mention of virtue.
In a document for soldiers that go to war, that's the military that Joe Biden built. That's what Hegseth walked into. And the generals running that military, the general who inherited 4 years of that culture, was fighting to keep it. Now, here's a specific fight that ended George's career because this wasn't about personalities. This was about DEI promotions, and George picked the wrong side. The Army assembled a promotion list, about 30 colonels ready to move up to a 1-star general. Hegseth reviewed that list. He pulled 4 names. 2 were officers promoted under the Biden administration, under Biden-era DEI programs. 2 were promoted as historic firsts rather than on merit alone. I don't want that. You don't want that. Hegseth said, not on my watch. His documented criteria: C-19 vaccines mandated enforcement on troops, DEI program affiliations, associations with Mark Milley. Those aren't arbitrary. Those are actual receipts. Biden told soldiers, get vaccinated or lose your career. You guys remember that? Some generals enforced that order enthusiastically. Hegseth is asking, why were those generals still getting promoted? General George had a different answer. He wanted to fight for those promotions. He asked for a meeting with Hegseth to argue his case.
He called, many of the generals promoted under Secretary Lloyd Austin and President Biden. He described them as, cowards hiding under their stars and whores to wokesters. So, when you put that language out there, I think it has a real chilling effect on people.
Oh, yeah. Well, on top of that, Hegseth has repeatedly said he wants to cut out woke from the military and make it all merit-based.
And then General George spent months proving the description's accurate by prioritizing DEI over the president's priorities. Here's the bottom line on that meeting request. George wanted to sit down and argue for keeping DEI promotions in place. Hegseth already made the decision. You don't want to take a meeting to regurgitate a closed question with a general who's supposed to be executing your mission, not fighting it. When your Army Chief of Staff's biggest concern is diversity metrics while your pilots are being downed behind Iranian lines, the meeting is over before it even starts, hombre. Hegseth fired him. That's the job.
My own reporting would suggest that there's been sort of this churn on this. How long will Randy George last? Whether or not Randy George is acceptable to Hegseth, really going back many months. And that Dan Driscoll, who had really kind of hit a good teamwork kind of vibe with the general, really did like him, really did want to keep him, and was increasingly frustrated trying to make the case to Secretary Hegseth.
Going back many months, that wasn't an impulsive decision. Hegseth watched George operate over the years. The answer was the same every single time. So on April 3rd, the answer became final. Now watch Hegseth describe specifically what he was cleaning out, because this speech right here a couple months ago to the chaplain corps is the clearest window into what the Biden military actually became.
Chaplains have been minimized, viewed by many as therapists instead of ministers. Faith and virtue were traded for self-help and self-care. If you need proof, just look at the current Army Spiritual Fitness Guide, saying that the soldier's spirit consists of consciousness, creativity, and connection. The guide itself reports that around 82% of the military are religious, yet ironically it alienates our warfighters of faith by pushing secular humanism. In short, it's unacceptable and unserious, so we're tossing it.
We're tossing it. We're putting it in the trash. That's what leadership looks like when you mean it. The general who was fighting to keep DEI promotions was fighting to keep the same culture that produced a spiritual guide with zero mentions of virtue. You want to know how you measure whether Hegseth made the right call? Watch who's upset. The same people who spent 4 years celebrating every single DEI, PlayStation 3, 5, and 6 milestone in the military are now absolutely furious that those milestones are getting reversed. They called it progressive when a general was promoted as a quote-unquote historic first. They call it a purge when Hegseth says the standard is over. Listen.
But I decry what the president did this week in his speech before the nation, in the way he bloviated and bragged about the destruction of Iran's ability to compete in this war. To me, it seemed like he was just going to incite such an attack on our military.
Then there's the media's tell. Watch how CNN described what the new Joint Chiefs looks like now that Hegseth has rebuilt it.
Those are entirely white men, despite the fact that as of 2024, nearly 33% of active duty service members are of color and nearly 18% are women. Hegseth made it quite clear that that type of representation in the top ranks does not matter to him.
Not combat effectiveness, not strategic competence, representation, if you would, you guys. That's exactly the standard Hegseth is removing. And the fact that CNN is upset about it proves he found it. And then there's the advocacy groups who weigh in after the promotion list story broke. They're calling it merit-based promotions. Guys, that tells you everything. When the standard is merit, the people who benefit from a different standard call it oppression. Here's a standard I hold to and Hegseth holds to that the left can't engage with honestly. I don't care what color you are. I care if you can do the job or not. If you got promoted because of your color, your gender, your diversity, equity, inclusion, instead of your competence, that's not representation. That is a liability in the war zone. That's a liability in the workplace, period. That's the thing, you guys, getting corrected now. And the meltdown from the people who put that system in place is the most honest confirmation that The correction is real. The left is defending generals. Hegseth is building an army. That's the difference between those two things. And it matters when you're at war. America is on day 33 of an active military engagement with Iran. The 82nd Airborne is deployed. An F-15 pilot was missing behind enemy lines. The Pentagon is weighing a ground invasion. This is not hypothetical about standards. And in that environment, Hegseth is installing people he knows, people he watched perform under pressure. The new Army Chief of Staff, General Christopher Lenev, served as Hegseth Army's aide for the past year. Hegseth knows how he thinks. He knows how he operates under stress. He knows he doesn't prioritize diversity metrics over mission effectiveness. You want somebody like that running your army when a pilot is on the ground in enemy territory.
When you're the Secretary of Defense, you want to have service chiefs and the chairman and others who you can really rely upon, who you can really kind of understand their judgment, their thinking. And that's something he has with Neve.
In war, that's the standard that keeps soldiers alive, not demographic representation, not quote unquote historic firsts, alignment, trust, and proven judgment. And let's look at a complete picture of what Hegseth has assembled at the top of this military in 15 months. Every officer at the top who made their career inside the DEI era has been shown the door.
The era of politically correct, overly sensitive, don't hurt anyone's feelings leadership ends right now. But I look out at this group and I see great Americans. Leaders who have given decades to our great republic at great sacrifice to yourselves and to your families. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is.
We're reviving the warrior ethos. We're eliminating the distractions and the debris.
Warrior ethos. That's the thing Biden's military traded for climate change workshops and identity months. Hegseth trading it back while America's at war. That's not a coincidence. It is exactly the right time to make that trade. Now watch what the military looked like from the outside when Biden's model was in full operation, because this is what the media called leadership.
Where it says senior Army officers reacted with anger and frustration to the news of General Randy George's dismissal, characterizing it as the latest blow to a service that already feels under siege by Mr. Hegseth. Again, the Army General Randy George was the Army Chief of Staff. And while we're at it, let's put up all the other military leaders who have been forced out under the Trump administration since it's been back in power. What does it say about the leadership, the civilian leadership of the Pentagon?
America, the media is never going to call this for what it is. They're going to call it a purge. They're going to count the number of white men in the new Joint Chiefs photo. They're going to bring on a congresswoman to call Hegseth thin-skinned. None of it matters, because here's what actually happened. The United States military had become a place where people got promoted for being the right race or the right gender, where the Army spiritual guide mentioned feelings 11 times, and God was mentioned once, where generals pushed C-19 vaccine mandates on enlisted soldiers and kept their careers. That, my friends, was the military Biden built on your dollar. Hegseth walked in and said he was done with it. General George spent months pushing back on that mission, and he lost. The same thing that happened when the first female Navy chief went home. Every time Hegseth removes somebody who built their career on the DEI framework, the media screams racism or bigotry. Every single time. Every time, the actual story is the same. The military is being restored. The warrior ethos is back. The meltdown on MSNBC's how you know that it's absolutely working. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comments section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.